All right, Shabbosai, good morning. Let us begin. Let's begin by thanking our sponsors. To thank our TALMUD TORAH sponsors for the month of Cheshvan, Meir and Rachel Gold, for dedicating all the Shurim and Drashos this month in memory of Yonah, Tzvi, Ben Yosef, Chaim, Elazar, HaKohen. Our TALMUD TORAH sponsors, Noam Leah Efron, in honor of and celebration of the 98th birthday of Noam's grandfather, Yosef Hershel ben Mordechai Halevi, and our Day of Learning sponsor, Frank and Danielle Storch, in memory of Mrs. Hanna Storch, Zichron Livracha, on the occasion of her first yahrzeit. We open that in the merit of our TALMUD TORAH, all of the neshamas will have an aliyah, and the families a nechama. And also with that, let us begin. So today's daf is daf Dalid. We have a great Gemara ahead of us today. We are picking up in Yirtzeh Hashem. Okay, so much to do. We are picking up in Yirtzeh Hashem on Gimel Amud Beis, right at the bottom. Literally again, the last phrase. Mas Kifler Rav Kahana. So Rav Kahana raised the kasha. He says, Umi Hichmitz. So also remember again, in yesterday's shir, we were dealing with the progression or the series of 4 different kings. Right? The kings we were dealing with was once again, the king we're focusing on right now is Daryavesh HaParsi. Right? Daryavesh the Persian. Remember again, who is the son of Achashverosh and Esther, and the one who ultimately, under his watch, under his rulership, the Beis HaMikdash is rebuilt. So the Gemara was discussing the idea that apparently Daryavesh started out good, right? He started out as a tzaddik, and then the lashon of the Gemara is hichmitz. He turned chametz. He turned sour. Right? Hichmitz doesn't just have to mean chametz. Listen to turning into vinegar, right? He turned sour. So the Gemara says, "Maskev Arkanah mi hichmitz." Is that true? That Daryavesh turned sour? The Gemara says, "But one second, but we learned in the pasuk here, the Gemara quotes the top of Dalid, Amud Dalid, the pasuk from Ezra, Uma choshchan, ubnei turin, v'dichrin, v'imrin, la'alun la'lakashmaya, chantin melach, chamar, mashach, kimamra, kahana, dibi Yerushalayim, lahu misyayev lahem, yom, dai lo shalu. So the Gemara over here in Navi Ezra seeks out the idea that Daryavesh ordered his quartermasters in Yerushalayim to give the Jews whatever they needed. Literally translated, give them oxen and sheep and wine and oil. Kimamar kanai, whatever the Kohanim say they need, give them. So we'll say that's a pretty generous gesture. So to say that now, again, I just want to point out, the Gemara is assuming that when did Daryavesh's change occur? His change occurred when Ezra went up to Yerushalayim. So the Gemara says that's clearly not the case. At the end of the day, he's allowing for unlimited supplies for the Jews of Yerushalayim. We'll say, watch this sugya. Rabbi Yitzchok said, Rebbe, mitunach. He said, Rebbe, Rav Kahana, I can answer you from your own bundle. De lahon mehakrivin nichusin lelo kashmaya umatzlin lechaye malka ubenohi. Look at what Daryavesh says in the next pasuk. In the very next pasuk says, and offer up all of these karbanos to your God. Why? So that the king and his sons will be saved from all misfortune. In other words, Daryavesh wasn't interested in the Jews. Daryavesh was interested in Daryavesh. Right? So even though, again, he's giving free-flowing supplies to the Jews of Yerushalayim, he's allowing for the stocking of the Beis HaMikdash. And he's saying whatever the Kohanim need, give them. It wasn't because Daryavesh was a big fan of the Jews. It was because Daryavesh wanted the Jews to supplicate on his behalf. To which the Gemara is supposed to listen to this. Uman da'avid haki lav mal yusihi. So what? So he gave tzedakah. He gave tzedakah for his own benefit. Giving tzedakah, is there anything wrong with giving tzedakah for your own benefit? After Abba say a profound sugya. Vatanya we learned. Ha'omer selazu litzedakah bishul sheyichyeh b'ni. If a person says, I'm hereby giving this selah, this coin to tzedakah, on the condition, right, or for the purpose that my son should live, or I'm giving tzedakah so that I should have a portion in the world to come, what does the Gemara say? Harei zeh tzadik gomer. Such a person is an absolute tzaddik. So what is the Gemara showing? There's absolutely no problem with giving tzedakah with the intention of getting something in return. Person says, I'm giving tzedakah so my child should live. I'm giving tzedakah so that I should get a portion of olam haba. But I both say the Gemara says, you're a tzaddik gomer. You're a tzaddik gomer. So both say, look at Rashi. Harei zeh tzaddik gomer im ragil b'kach. If he's regular in this. Now, we'll have to see exactly what that phrase means in just a moment. So we'll say, so if that's the case, we'll say, by the way, this is such a profound Gemara because in general, we'll see Tosas in just a moment, in general, we do not paskin this way. In other words, not that we don't paskin this way, we don't adopt this theological approach. At the end of the day, we don't want people doing mitzvos in order to receive something in return, to which the Gemara says, Lo kashya, kan be Yisrael, kan ba'avdei kochavim. We'll say, when is it okay to do a mitzvah with the intention of getting something in return? That's for Jews. That's for Jews. But for Gentiles, for non-Jews, ultimately, again, we do not accept this approach. So we'll say, so therefore, again, before we get into this, so therefore, for a Jew to do a mitzvah, to give tzedakah, on the condition that his son will live, on the condition I'll get olam haba, that's acceptable. Not only is it acceptable, but what? He's a tzaddik gomer. But for a Gentile, for an akum, this is an unacceptable theological approach. Therefore, again, Dar Yavesh is considered to be as if he was hichmitz, even though he gave tzedakah, because he gave tzedakah in order to get something out of it. Now, what's this distinction between the Jew and the non-Jew? Take a look at Rashi. Kan be Yisrael, shali wala shamayim, because we assume that the Jew has his allegiance to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'im marian lo b'chayav eino kari l'tagar. So listen to this. See, what's the problem with doing mitzvos with the intention of getting something? What's the problem? If you don't get it. If you don't get it. So what happens if you don't get what it is that you really wanted from HaKadosh Baruch Hu? So for the Jew, we assume that if a Jew doesn't get what he wants, what's the theological response to not getting? This is a very important yesod. What's the theological response in life to not getting what you want? Right? Either A, I didn't deserve it. Right? I didn't deserve it. I didn't deserve it. In other words, who's to say just because I ask for something doesn't mean that I have the requisite merit in order to get it. So sometimes the answer is no, because I didn't deserve it. And sometimes the answer is no, because it's not the right thing for me to have. So at the end of the day, to ask, to say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm doing this mitzvah, I'm giving this tzedakah, in order that you give me something in return. That is an acceptable approach, because if the answer is no, we are confident, I've also said this is very important, we are confident that the Jew possesses the theological sophistication, the spiritual sophistication to understand you don't get everything you ask for. That's just the way life works. And I have to be a big boy about that, even if at the end of the day I'm asking for something that's really, really important. Sometimes I don't get what I ask for, either because A, I don't deserve it. I don't deserve it. Or B, because even though I think it's the right thing for me, it may not actually be the right thing for me. Back to Rashi. Aval tol Yisrael ba'avono. Aval ovid kochavim im ein mativin lo kigamulo kora teger. The Gemara assumes that the spirituality of a Gentile is much more fragile. And therefore, again, in the event that the Gentile serves HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the intention of receiving something and does not get that intended request, that shatters the Gentile spirituality. And therefore, again, interestingly enough, from the Gemara's perspective, it is permitted for the Jew to give tzedakah. I'm using the word on a condition, but you understand, with a condition. Not that I'm taking it back if I don't get what I want, but at the end of the day, because I want something in return. Because we are confident in the strength of the Jew's theology, that if you don't get it, your relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is still intact. But as I take a look at Tosas for just a moment, Tosas writes, Top Tosas, Bishul Sheichya B'ni, V'hadis Nam Parakama de Meseches Avos, Al Tzu Kavadim HaMisham Shnesrav Amenas Lakabel Pras. Shabbos say, what about the Mishnah in Avos? Antigonus, right? Opening Mishnah, it's the third Mishnah in the first parak. Antigonus says, do not be like servants who worship the master for the condition of receiving reward. So what do you do with that? To which Tosas answers, Hainu b'uma sa'olam sheton ala rishonim. Tosas essentially gives the same explanation of Rashi. Antigonus says, don't serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the purpose of receiving reward when the existence of your faith is predicated on receiving that reward. So that you can't do. Because then the problem is if I don't get what it is that I'm asking for, at the end of the day, that shatters my spirituality. So says Tosas, Antigonus, interestingly enough, was talking to the non-Jewish population. I guess the non-Jewish population reads Pirkei Avos, right? The non-Jewish population, right? Do not set up a theology like that because your theology is not strong enough to withstand not receiving that it is that you asked for. But for a Yid, for a Jew, we assume, can I ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu for things? Can I give tzedakah with the intention of receiving something? Absolutely. And I will say, but what the Gemara is sensitizing us to is ask and ask and ask and ask. For HaKadosh Baruch Hu has the capacity to grant everything. But if I don't get that which I am asking for, my relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to be strong enough that I recognize either A, I didn't deserve it, or he didn't want me to have it because it's not the right thing for me. So I will say, this sugi, by the way, is so fascinating in and of itself. So much rabbinic literature about this idea of doing mitzvos in order to get something in return. We don't have time for it now. But for our purposes, for the Gemara saying, even though Daryavesh went ahead and gave all of this tzedakah, gave all of this money to the Beis HaMikdash, at the end of the day, it wasn't lishma. It wasn't just for the sake of doing a mitzvah or helping the Jews. It was so that he would get something out of it. Therefore, again, this act of tzedakah is not a raya against the fact that he did not turn sour later on in life. I'll just end with one piece. Rashi's statement is very strange. Right? Rashi's lashon is harei zeh tzadik gomer. If you give tzedakah, right? If you give a selah, and you say on the condition, ultimately again that my son lives. So Rashi says Gemara says you're a tzadik gomer. Rashi says imragil b'kach. If you regularly do this. So what does that mean? So I'll share with you something amazing. The Divrei Chaim, the Sons of Rav, quotes from the Choza of Lublin. And the Choza of Lublin, I want to read this to you. He says, first of all, Rashi is bothered by the idea, how can you call such a person like this a tzaddik gomer? Oh, Zabosai, doesn't everyone agree that there's a higher level of giving tzedakah? What's the higher level of giving tzedakah? The higher level? Don't attach anything to it. Just give it. See, you want to tell me a guy who goes ahead and gives tzedakah on the condition that his son will live is still a tzaddik. Good, fine. A tzaddik gomer? That's a tzaddik? No, it's not a tzaddik gomer. So Rashi's bothered by this idea, says the Choza of Lublin, that such a person is called a tzaddik gomer. So look what Rashi understands. Ella, I'm going to read to you. Bishul sheyichya b'ni, says the Choza of Lublin. This is his interpretation of Rashi. What does it mean when a father gives tzedakah and he says on the condition that my son will live? Hainu chiyus dikidusha. Shechiyuso tiyer l'chvod Hashem yizbarach la'ovdo u'lekayim toraso. V'lachein nikra tzadik gomer. Says the Choza of Lublin. What does the Gemara mean over here when it says that a father davens that his son should live? Says the Choza, it is not referring to physical life. It is referring to spiritual life. That a father who davens for his son to be holy, a father who davens for his son to be inspired, a father who davens for his son to be a ben Torah, to be a Talmid Chacham, to be someone who has a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is called a tzaddik gomer. But says Rashi, you're only a tzaddik gomer if what? What was Lashon of Rashi? Emragil b'kach. Do you daven every day for the spiritual success of your children? Do you daven every single day for the spiritual success of your children? Do you do mitzvos every single day for the spiritual success of your children? It is so difficult to raise heilige children. It is so difficult to raise holy children, to raise inspired children, to raise children who follow in the ways of Yaakov Saba Kadisha. It is so difficult. And therefore says the Gemara, if this is your focus, and every single day you do mitzvos to go ahead and give zechuyos to your children, to carry on in the way of spiritual life, and you're rogil b'kach, you do it day in and day out, that's a tzaddik gomer. That's a tzaddik gomer. So again, the Chos of Lublin, being quoted by Divrei Chaim, understands this in a little bit of a different way. Not speaking about the physical vitality of my child, but a parent who davens every single day, does mitzvahs every single day, for the intention, I do a mitzvah, Kadosh Baruch Hu, I'm doing this mitzvah, so that you should help my child along the correct path, Harei Zeh Tzaddik Gomer. Which I will say teaches us such an incredible yesod about our responsibility as parents. Our responsibility as parents is not only to provide for the physical and material needs of our children. It's not only to go out and tell them about the things that they should be doing, but we have to daven for our children every day. And we have to do mitzvos in the zechus of our children. And when I give tzedakah, because the Gemara's example is tzedakah, to give the tzedakah and say, Kadosh Baruch Hu, I'm giving this tzedakah b'shvil sheyichye b'ni, because I want my children to be spiritually alive. The Gemara says if you do that every single day, you do mitzvahs for your kids, ruchnius every single day, harei zeh tzaddik gomer. Good, let's go weiter. Says the Gemara, the other possibility is, how do we know? How do we know that Daryavesh soured later on in his life? So also listen to this. Tichsev nidbachin di even galal tlasa v'nidbach di achados v'nafkasa min bais malka tisyayv. So also listen to this. When Daryavesh commissioned the construction of the Beis Hamikdash, what he did was as follows. There were three rows. Three rows of marble, one row of wood. Right? That's how he constructed the walls, the edifice of the Beis Hamikdash. Three rows of marble, one row of wood. Why did Daryavesh insert a row of wood by every 3 rows of marble? So we'll say, listen to how wild this is. Savar, imardu beyudai, iklai benura. Because Daryavesh said, if the Jews ever rebel against me, I want to put flammable material in their Beis Hamikdash, so that I have the ability to destroy it. Which I will say, if you think about it, by the way, this is such an incredibly important yesod. Because, and this is also incredibly important for us who live in Galus, to recognize that what it means to live in Galus is that even when you are the beneficiaries of the good, of sometimes again the rulers of the countries in which we live, that good always comes with something. That good always comes with something. And that good is never pure, and that good is never fully altruistic, and that good always comes with some type of implosion button, right? Or some type of flammable material. It's so incredibly important because sometimes we become too comfortable, and sometimes we become too settled, and sometimes we think that of course, the nation in which we live has our back, and we always have to be careful because there might be many rows of beautiful stone. There's always that row of flammable wood that chas v'shalom could be ignited. Atu Shlomo lo avid hachi, but did Shlomo not do this? Or says Shlomo also built the Beis Hamikdash in the same way. Dichsev shalosh turi gazis v'tur karsos arazis. There were 3 rows of hewn stone and 1 row of wood, cedar wood. So the Gemara says Shlomo avid milamala, v'yu avid milamata. First of all, Shlomo put the wood up high, and Daryavesh put the wood down low. In other words, Shlomo only put a couple of rows of cedar wood, almost like as decoration towards the top of the structure. Ultimately, Daryavesh does it at the bottom of the structure. Why the bottom of the structure? Easily ignited. So the Gemara says, Shlomo shakei b'minyana. Shlomo went ahead and recessed the wood beams so that they were sunk into the walls. Ihu lo shaki b'minyana. Daryavesh didn't recess them. Shlomo sajeh b'sida. Furthermore, Shlomo covered the wood with plaster. Ihu lo sajeh b'sida. And Daryavesh did not go ahead and cover the wood with plaster. So we'll say, so that the Gemara uses as a proof to the fact that Daryavesh's disposition, right, his spirituality, his holiness soured at some point in his life. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yitzchok, another example. So far, we'll say we have 2 different examples. So we're now moving on to our 3rd example of how Daryavesh went ahead and soured. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yitzchok, how do you know that Daryavesh soured? From the following pasuk. So the king said to me, so this is Nehemiah, V'hashegel yosheves etzlo. And the shegel was sitting next to him. So we'll say this goes back to the pasuk that we quoted in yesterday's daf, right? This is when, remember, Nehemiah gave Daryavesh the report that Nehemiah received from his brother. Remember what was his brother's name from yesterday's daf? Hanani, right? And remember again, Hanani gave Nehemiah the report in Kislev. Nehemiah delivered the report again in Nisan. And this is where the king says, Daryavesh says to Nehemiah, go to Yerushalayim, right? Nehemiah asks if he can go. He says, go, just tell me when you're leaving, tell me when you're coming back. So the way the pasuk starts is the king is sitting there, and as Shegel Yoshav es Eslo, the Shegel was sitting next to him. My Shegel, what's a Shegel? Amar Rabba Bar Lima, Mishmei Derav, Kalbasa, a female dog. A female dog. Now, why was a female dog sitting next to Nehemiah? Look at Rashi, Kalbasa, Lemishkav. Apparently, Daryavesh was intimate with this dog, engaged in bestiality with this dog. So remember again, even Bnei Noach, right? Part of the Shem Mitzvahs Bnei Noach is a code of morality, and bestiality is aser. So the Gemara says, so therefore we'll say this is how you see that Daryavesh spiritually soured the fact that he was engaging in relations with the dog. So the Gemara says, "Elameata hadichsev va'almara shmayis romamta ulamanye dibesa hayisav kadmach va'ant rav v'neich shaglasech ulechanasech chamra shasinbo." Suppose the Gemara here quotes from the pasuk from Danielle. So the Gemara here is talking about King Belshazzar and talking about again how Belshazzar and his shegel drank wine from the utensils of the Beis Hamikdash. So the Gemara says, if shegel is a dog, v'shegel kalbasa, he kalbasa bas mishasya chamrahi, does a dog drink wine from a cup? In other words, it doesn't make sense. To which the Gemara says, halo kasha, yeah, you could train a dog to do anything, right? So you could train a dog to drink wine from a cup. So therefore, again, it could be that Belshazzar disparaged and demeaned the utensils of the Beis Hamikdash so intensely that quite literally he trained his dog to drink wine from the cups of the Beis Hamikdash. Elameata. I'll bring another pasuk. Dichsir, I'll say first wide line. Benos malachim bikurasech nitzvah. So we'll say here the Gemara is quoting from the pasuk in Tehillim. Benos malachim bikurasecha nitzvah shegel liyamincha bekeser ofim. So we'll say literally it says the daughters of kings will be exalted by you. Nitzvah shegel liminecha. The shegel is to your right and is adorned with a keser or fear, a crown of the jewel of Ophir. So the Gemara says, "V'ishagel kalbisa." My kamavasun avinabosai. This pasuk is actually referring to the Messianic era and is exalting Klal Yisrael. If shegel is a dog, why is that here in the pasuk which describes the Messianic era? So the Gemara says, "Haki kamar." This is what it means to say. This is what the pasuk means to say. Bischar shechaviva Torah liYisrael. Because Torah is beloved to the Jewish people as immorality is to the nations of the world. Zachisem lekesem Ophir. Ultimately, again, we are privileged to get the crown of the jewel of Ophir. So I will say, interestingly enough, the Gemara is still saying shegel means a dog. Shegel means a dog. And the comparison is like this, that essentially, just like the nations of the world are so attached to immorality. Like a dog follows its owner, so too Klal Yisrael is so attached to Torah, like a dog follows its owner. Which I will say something very interesting. The Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh so quoted goes to this idea, why is it compared to a dog? See, interesting, the Baal Shem Tov says something so beautiful. He says that there is something about the relationship between a dog and his master, right? There is a connection that is there. He is kasher. The dog is nikshar. The dog is connected to this master. And the dog, the nature of that relationship it's interesting that it's almost an unquestioned relationship. Right? It's a relationship that endures. So the goal, it's actually quite beautiful. The goal in our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, relationship with Torah, is to create the kind of relationship almost that a dog has with his master. That incredible, unbreakable strength of a bond that is there not just when times are good and not just when times are easy, but ultimately, again, that relationship that is intact in all life circumstances. I will say, isn't this the hardest part of Ruchnius? Right? Isn't this the hardest part? Because inevitably, like in all life relationships, we have peaks and valleys. It's interesting. So also, Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh says, Kishem, when we say to a little boy when he's born at his bris, Kishem shenichnas lebris, ken yikanis LaTorah, ulechuppah, ulemaisim tovim. So everyone wonder, first of all, I hope that's not true. Right? Kishem shenichnas lebris, the same way you sat here at the bris, so too should be your chuppah, your Torah, your maisim. I don't know, I could think of better things to compare it to, right? Lamaisa, the bris is a painful experience, right, to the baby. So what does that mean? So the Hashana says something so beautiful. A bris is part of who you are, right? It's not the pshat. You know what? Today, I don't feel like being circumcised. I'm not feeling the whole bris thing today, right? I just don't feel like a bris guy today. Whether you feel it or you don't feel it, it's part of who you are. So what do we say to a little boy when he comes into the covenant of Avram Avinu? Kishem shenichnas lebris. The same way you enter into bris, that it's part of you. Can you kanes the Torah? Torah, it can't be. It can't be, today I'm in the mood, tomorrow I'm not in the mood. It's part of me. It's part of me. So if it's part of me, mood is irrelevant. Torah is something I do. Torah is something I live. Torah is something I learn. I'm rested, I'm not rested, I'm happy, I'm not happy, in a good place, not in a good place. It doesn't matter. The same way that it doesn't matter how I feel, I'm still circumcised. Torah has to be part of me as well. Chuppah. We'll say, do you know what the key to successful marriage is? I have no idea. But, what I will tell you is as follows, is that you have to be 1,000% vested. I'm in. It's part of who I am. Do you know what the greatest problem of shalom bayis is? Is people often enter into relationships and they don't have both feet in. They just don't have both feet in. I'm not sure. I'm just not sure. And you'd be surprised how many people are decades into their marriage and are still unsure. You want a successful relationship? It's got to be part of you. I'm in. We had a fight today. We didn't have a fight today. Whatever it is, we're going to work it through. We're going to work it through. This marriage is part of who I am. Maisim tovim. It can't be. Some days I'm a good guy. Some days I'm not a good guy. Some days I do the right thing. Some days I don't do the right thing. It's got to be part of who I am. And isn't that the secret to Ruchnius? Kishem shenichnas lebris. Ken yikanis LaTorah l'chuppah l'maisim tovim. The Gemara says the same way that the Arayis follows Dumas around like a dog, so we have a connection with Torah, that Kadosh Baruch Hu, like the dog has with his master. Let's go back to V'ibay Sema. The other possibility is, really have to focus on the Gemara today. V'ibay Sema. L'olam shegel malkisa. In reality, shegel is a queen. Shegel doesn't mean a dog. Shegel means a queen. So the Gemara says, "V'rabba bar lema Gemara gamirla va'amai karle shegel she'sachaviva alav kishegel." So we'll say, so shegel means a queen. What it means is Daryavesh's queen was a dog. Now we'll say again, that's not a commentary on a human being, right? That's literally saying he took a dog as his queen. He took a dog as his queen. So the Gemara says, so why does it call the dog a queen? Because he loved this dog as much as one would love a queen. Or he sat the dog next to him, just like a king would seat a queen next to him. So we'll say, so this is another proof to the fact that Daryavesh suffered this spiritual setback. The possibility is, how do you know that Daryavesh suffered a setback? Ad kesef kichrin mea, v'ad chantin kurin mea, v'ad chamer batin mea, v'ad batin mashach mea, umelech di lo kasav. So also listen to this. So the Gemara over here is quoting the pasuk that talks about how much Daryavesh allowed for the Beis HaMikdash. Now, interesting, there are two psukim. First pasuk says, Daryavesh says, like we saw before, give as much as you want. Whatever the Jews need, give them. Second pasuk gives amounts. The Gemara assumes the fact that in the second follow-up pasuk, Daryavesh caps the amount which can be given to the Jews indicates that what? He had a change of heart. To which the Gemara says, in the beginning, he gave without restraint, and now he's putting a cap. So we'll say the Gemara uses this as a proof that obviously he suffered some type of setback. So we'll say that's not necessarily true. The Gemara rejects this one. That's not true. It could be in the beginning he said give them whatever they want because he didn't know how much they needed. As the project became more defined, he knew how much they needed, and therefore ordered his quartermasters to give that much. But the fact that he put a cap on it, or put a amount on it, doesn't mean that he loved the Jews any less. To which the Gemara says, you're right, let's reject that one. Ella michavarta kiddushin lemeikara. So Rabbi will say, we have three different possibilities to highlight the spiritual decline of Daryavesh, but one thing is clear, which is, although he started out good, something happened with Daryavesh that ultimately changed his spiritual disposition. Incredible. So let's go weiter. Ulu regalim. So we'll say now, we've closed out Mazel Tov. Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov. We first closed out the first phrase of the Mishnah, right? That ultimately, again, Abba Rosh Hashanah, and remember again, Nisan, the first thing that Nisan is a Rosh Hashanah for is for kings. So first of all, we've established is for what kind of kings is Nisan Rosh Hashanah? Jewish kings, or who alternatively, who else? Gentile kings who are ksherim. That's the other possibility. Good. Next, that Nisan is the Rosh Hashanah for regalim. So the Gemara says, okay, regalim be'achad b'Nisan b'chamisha asar b'Nisan. What are you talking about? There's no Yom Tiv on the 1st of Nisan, right? The Yom Tiv in Nisan is on the 15th of Nisan. It's Pesach. So what do you mean when you say that Nisan is the Rosh Hashanah for regalim? Amar Rav Chisda, regel shebo Rosh Hashanah l'regalim. What it means is Nisan has the month which is the Rosh Hashanah for regalim. So boss, it's very important. The Gemara clarifies this. It does not mean that the 1st of Nisan is the Rosh Hashanah for regalim. Rather, what does it mean? Pesach, the Yom Tiv which occurs in Nisan, is the Rosh Hashanah for regalim. Now, boss, say, what does that mean, Rosh Hashanah for regalim? Listen to this. Nafkamina lenoder lemekil ma'alei b'Baal Tachar. Boss, we actually saw this before in Maseches Sukkah. So I'm sorry, Maseches Beya. So very exciting chazar. Actually, I think we saw it in Sukkah also. I will say the halacha is, if you go ahead and you have an obligation upon you, there is a mitzvah to fulfill your obligation in a timely manner. If you don't fulfill it in a timely manner, you are in violation of the prohibition of Baal Ta'acher. Do not delay. So I will say, see, interestingly enough, we have to know, so the significance of Pesach being the Rosh Hashanah for regalim is to allow me to understand when I would be in violation of Baal Ta'acher. Watch this, Rabbi. Here we go. For Rabbi Shimon, and this reflects the view of Rabbi Shimon. This sanya, echad hanoder ve'echad hamakdish ve'echad hamarich. Whether you make a neder, or whether you're makdish something, or whether you make an erech vow. So both say that these are all voluntary offerings. Kevan sha'avra alav gimel regalim over beBaal Ta'acher. Once 3 regalim go by, and you have not honored your commitment, you are in violation of delaying, Baal Ta'acher. Rabbi Shimon says, Gimel, so we'll say that's the Tanakama. Rabbi Shimon says, Gimel regalim kisidron v'chag hamatzos tchila. Rabbi Shimon says as follows, you're only in violation of Baal Ta'acher, yes, when you pass 3 regalim, but it's got to be 3 regalim in what? In what? In order. In order. So it's a Pesach, a Shavuos, and the Sukkos. Therefore, again, the Chag HaMatzos Tchila, v'cheni Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Omer, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai said, regalim, pamim gimel pamim, pamim gimel pamim dalet pamim chamisha. So we'll say sometimes when you make a particular neder, you could have 3 regalim, 4 regalim, or even 5 regalim before you're in violation of Baal Ta'acher. How so? Nadar lifnei Pesach gimel. We'll say, for example, if you made a neder right before Pesach, so you have how long? How long to honor the neder? 3. Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkos. But lifnei atzeres, what happens if you went ahead and you made your neder before Shavuos? So what happens if you make your neder before Shavuos? So how many regalim do you have? Shavuos, Sukkos, but then the clock doesn't start until Pesach. Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkos. You have 5 regalim. So we'll say the difference over here is Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. We'll see this in just a moment again. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai says it's not just 3 regalim that you have. It's 3 regalim in the order of the regalim until you are in violation of Baal Ta'acher. So we'll say, let's see this in greater depth. So Tan Rabbanan, Chayve Hadamin, people who are Chayiv. Abosar Damin means, Rashi says, a person makes a neder, Dami alai, my value I pledge to the Beis HaMikdash. Or Erchen, Charamin, Hekdeshos. Right, Abosar, these are all different types of vows. Chatos v'ashamos. Or not vows, Chatos, an Asham, an Ola, a Shlomim, Tzedakos, I pledge Tzedakah, Maisrus, Bechar, Meiser upesach. So we'll say these are all different obligations. So you have a mixture over here. You have some voluntary items, some obligatory items. On the base, leket shichacha upeya. So we'll say again, these are different tithes. or I should say different agricultural gifts, right? Leket, shikha, peah is the corner. Leket, you drop a stalk. Shikha, you leave behind the bundle. Kevan she'avru alein shlosha regalim. Shabbos say, here's what's interesting. We've now expanded the scope over here. It's not just by a voluntary offering. Any obligation you have, right, whether it's voluntary or obligatory, you must satisfy that obligation in a timely manner. What is considered to be a timely manner? Kevan she'avru alein shlosha regalim. You have 3 regalim. And once you don't honor that obligation of 3 regalim, over bebal ta'acher, you are in violation of bal ta'acher. So both say, now we're going to go through a series of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different opinions as to what bal ta'acher means. Here we go. Rabbi Shimon says, shlosha regalim kisidran. Rabbi Shimon says, now both say, so the Tanna Kama says, 3 regalim, but not in order. Not in order, right? You don't have to go in order. Rabbi Shimon says, shlosha regalim kisidran. Rabbi Shimon says, 3 regalim in order. In order, which Rabbi says, we just saw before, Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot, which means that sometimes you can have more than 3 regalim until you'll go ahead in violation. The Chag HaMatzos Tchila, and the first regal, so we'll say it's 3. So again, the Tanna Kama is holding that halacha l'maisa, you need 3 regalim, but the 3 regalim need not occur in order. Rabbi Shimon saying the 3 regalim have to occur in order. Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot. So therefore, effectively, the clock doesn't start until Pesach. Rabbi Meir says, Kevan she'avra aleim regel echad over Bal Ta'acher. So we'll say, watch this. We go from the most lenient to the most machmir. So you have Rabbi Shimon Yochai who says, you're only in violation of Bal Ta'acher when you go through 3 regalim with Pesach being the first. Remember, in Rabbi Shimon Yochai's Manal Bosai, what's the maximum amount of time you can have until you have an obligation to fulfill your obligation? 5 regalim. Rabbi Meir says, 1 regal. As soon as you pass by 1 regal, right, and you have not honored your obligations, you're in violation of Bal Ta'acher. And I will say, if Hashkon Trai Meir, it doesn't even matter which regal, whatever regal it is. Next, Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov Omer, Kevan Shavar Aleim Shnei Regalim over Bal Ta'acher. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, 2 regalim. You have 2 regalim to fulfill your obligations. Once 2 regalim pass, you are in violation of Bal Ta'acher. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Kevan Shavar Aleim Chag Hasukos over Aleim Bal Ta'acher. What's that? Very interesting. Rabbi Shimon says, Sukkos. Sukkos is the trigger for Bal Ta'acher. Bal Ta'acher. Once Sukkot passes and you have not honored your obligations, you're in violation of Bal Ta'acher. So we'll say, so now these are it's really 6 opinions, right? It's the Tanna Kama, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, 5, and Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shimon. Right? So these are the 5 opinions as to how you violate Bal Ta'acher. And I will say, now we're going to go through and show the proof or the source for each opinion. My time at the Tanna Kama. What's the reason of Tanna Kama? So remember again, what does Tanna Kama hold? Let's quick review Tanna Kama. 3 regalim, but no specific order. So whenever you make your neder, the clock starts and you have 3 regalim to fulfill your obligation. So my time in Tanna Kama, so michti, minayhu salik, lama li lemehadar, umichtiv, b'chag hamatzos, b'chag hasukos, u'b'chag hashavuos. Rabbi say, listen to this. So the Tanna Kama says like this. The Torah is already speaking about the 3 regalim. Right? So the Torah is already speaking about the 3 regalim. When it talks about the obligation or the prohibition of Bal Ta'acher, why does the Torah, if it's already speaking about the 3 regalim, why the need to restate the 3 regalim again? Chag HaMatzos, Chag HaShavuos, Chag HaSukos. Shma Mina leBal Ta'acher. To teach us to restate the regalim for the purposes of Bal Ta'acher. And to teach me that halacha l'maisa, I am in violation of Bal Ta'acher. If what? If I allow 3 regalim to elapse without honoring my commitments. And again, the order of those regalim is inconsequential, but you have 3 regalim. Rabbi Shimon says, Ino tzarech lomar b'chag hasukos, shebo diber hakosev. Rabbi Shimon, on the other hand, says that halacha l'maisa, the Torah did not need to mention Chag HaSukos. Why? Because Rabbi say the Yom Tiv in which the discussion about Ta'acher occurs is actually in the section of the Yom Tiv of Sukkos. So the Gemara says, Lama ne'emar, so why do you have to mention Sukkos again? Lomar shezeh acharon. To teach me that in the Bal Ta'acher continuum, Sukkos is the last Yom Tiv. So in other words, you're only in violation of Bal Ta'acher of what? Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkos. It has to go in order. Rabbi Meir, my time. What's Rabbi Meir's logic? Let's remember again, Rabbi Meir says, even one regel. Right? Even if one regel elapses and you have not gone ahead and honored your commitments, you are in violation of Baal Ta'achar. Why does Rabbi Meir say this? My time. Tichsiv ubasa shama v'havesem shama. Because the Pasuk says, you will come there. You will come there. Now, you will come there refers to what? Aliyah l'regel. You'll come there for Yom Tiv, and ve'vesim shaman, you have to bring your stuff. So from that, Rabbi Meir says, as soon as you have an obligation to come to Yerushalayim, i.e. one regel, and you don't bring your stuff, you are in violation of Baal Ta'achar. So I will say, what did the Rabbanon, what does the Tanna Kama do with that? For Rabbanon, hahu la'aseh. That comes to go ahead and teach you a positive commandment of Aliyah l'regel. So Rabbi Meir, kevan da amar le, rachmana aisi v'lo aisi, memela kamle b'Baal Ta'achar. Rabbi Meir will say, once the Torah tells you to bring your stuff, and your stuff means all of your pledged and obligatory items, and you don't bring it, by definition, you are in violation of Baal Ta'achar. Fine. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, we'll see what Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, what was his opinion? Remember again, what was his opinion? Two regalim. After the passage of two regalim, you are in violation of Baal Ta'achar. My timer, what's his logic? T'chsiv, eile tasu l'Hashem b'moadechem. These are the things you should do to HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'moadechem, on your Yomim Tovim, plural. Miut moadim shnayim. And I will say the minimum definition of moadim is what? Is two. So from here, Rabbi Elazar says, this is what you should do for Hashem on your moadechem, on your Yomim Tovim. Teaches me, I have to honor my commitments to HaKadosh Baruch Hu over the course of two Yomim Tovim. Meaning I'm not in violation of Baal Ta'achar until two Yomim Tovim elapse. The Rabbanon will say, Hahu lichid Rabbi Yonah. This comes to reflect the view of Rabbi Yonah. Da'am Rabbi Yonah, hukshu kol ha'mo'adim kulam zelazeh. All of the Yomim Tovim are compared to one another to teach me that what? Shekulam mechaprim al tumas mikdash v'kadashav. Did I will say part of the offerings on Yom Tiv, ultimately again, so the Torah is comparing the Yom Tovim to each other to teach me that all of the Yom Tovim have the ability to atone for the inadvertent entry into the Beis HaMikdash in a state of Tumah, or consumption of sacrificial items in a state of Tumah. Good. Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon, my time, I will say Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon, what does Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon says? He says Sukkos. Once Sukkos passes, right, ultimately you're in violation of Baal Ta'achar. So where does he get that from? My time, the Sanya Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon Omer, Lo Yomer Chag HaSukkos, Shebo Diber HaKosuv. The Torah did not need to restate Chag HaSukkos because that's the Yom Tiv in which this entire discussion is occurring. Lama Ne'amar, so why is Sukkos stated? Lomar Shezeh Gorim, to teach me that ultimately what? That Allah Lamaisa, it is the passage of the Yom Tiv of Sukkos which triggers the violation of Baal Ta'achar. To which the Gemara says, Hi, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, Hi Chagas B'ch, Hi, B'chaga matzos, b'chaga shavos, b'chaga sugos. My darshube. What does he do with that extra phrase? Where the Torah once again speaks out to Regalim. This teaches us. Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon said, "Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Oshia, minayin la'atzeres sheyesh la tashlumin kol shiva." So he'll say that phrase b'chaga matzos, b'chaga shavos, b'chaga sugos comes to teach me something different. Namely, what does it do? It comes to compare Shavuos to Pesach. To teach me what? Just like Pesach has Tashlumin. So the Gemara says, Talmud Lomar b'chag hamatzos b'chag hashos b'chag hasukos. Makish chag hashavos l'chag hamatzos. It comes to compare Shavuos to Pesach. How so? Machag hamatzos yesh lo Tashlumin kol shiva. We learn this halacha. You're supposed to bring your carbon chagiga when? First day of Pesach. What happens if you didn't bring your Shalmei Chagiga first day of Pesach? What can you do? You have all 7 days. Just like Pesach has 7 days to make up the Shalmei Chagiga, so too does Shavuos. Now, I will say, what's the novelty in that ruling? Because how long is the Yom Tov Shavuos? 1 day. Right? But just like Pesach has 7 days of makeup, so too Shavuos has 7 days of makeup as well. That's why the Torah is restating B'chag HaShavuos, B'chag HaSukkos, B'chag HaMatzos, B'chag HaShavuos, B'chag HaSukkos. B'chag HaMatzos, B'chag HaShavuos, B'chag HaSukkos, to compare Shavuos to Pesach. So B'chag HaMatzos, Yeshot Tashlumin Kol Shiva, Av Chag HaShavuos, Yeshot Tashlumin Kol Shiva. The Gemara said, 1 second. V'leikish l'chag HaSukkos. Even better. Why don't you compare Shavuos to Sukkos? Because Sukkos is even better. Why is Sukkos better than Pesach? Because Rabbi say, Malalan Shmona, Afkan Shmona. Because remember, what happens if you don't bring your Shalmi Chagiga on the first day of Sukkos? Rabbi say, you don't have 7 days. How long do you have? 8 days. You can even make up your Shalmi Chagiga of Sukkos on Shmini Atzeres. To which the Gemara says, no, that's not a fair comparison because Shmini Regal Bifnei Atzmo. Shmini Atzeres is its own Yom Tiv. To which the Gemara says, you're right. But Eimar Da'amrin and Shmini Regal Bifnei Atzmo, Liyan Pizar Kishav, little Chazara. We'll say, we know Shmini Atzeres is a Yom Tiv Bifnei Atzmo, ultimately again, for the purposes of Pizar Kishav. We'll talk about that in just a moment. So we'll say Rashi points out over here. Rashi points out different. What is Pizar Kishav? We learned this already. Look at Rashi. Let's just look at it. Pizar Kishav. Kevar Perashil Meseches Yuma Umeseches Sukkah. So we'll say the pay is pious. There's a lottery, a new lottery for who's going to do the avoda on Shmini Atzeres. Lepara Abba B'Shmini. Ve'er Karlo Tisedem Shmor Shoshana. Ushlishi Apart Good. So the Gemara says Kshav. Skip down a little bit. Right? Kshav is carbon. Ultimately, again, it has its own unique carbon. Reish, he goes on, he says over here, I'm trying to find it in Rashi. Good. Regal bifnei atzmo, Rashi says, it's its own yomtiv. It's its own yomtiv. Actually, no, I don't want to rush through this. We'll stop over here with Pizak Shav. I just want to tell you where we're ending off. We're ending off over here, is a five-way machlokes, ultimately, again, in the duration of Baal Ta'acher. Everyone agrees conceptually there's a concept of Baal Ta'acher. Of course, it's in the Torah. You cannot delay bringing your voluntary and sacrificial obligations. Five-way machlokes as to when the prohibition of Baal Ta'acher is triggered. What this last piece, Rabbi says something very specific, right? This last piece is going in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon, right? Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon holds that halacha l'maisa. All you need is the passage of Sukkos in order to trigger Baal Ta'acher. If that's the case, what does Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon do with the pasuk of B'chag HaMatzos, B'chag HaShavuos, or B'chag HaSukkos? Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon uses that to teach me that Shavuos is like Pesach, namely, just like Pesach has 7 days of Tashlumin for the Chagiga, so too Shavuos has 7 days of Tashlumin for the Chagiga. What the Gemara is now focusing on is why are you comparing Shavuos to Pesach, which only gives you 7 days. Compare it to Sukkos, which gives you 8 days. That Emir Tashem will deal with tomorrow. Shkoyach.